You are listening to the Keeping It Juicy podcast.
Your main squeeze in nutrition.
Don't forget to subscribe so you can join us every Tuesday for a brand new episode.
Also, don't forget to add us on Instagram and Facebook at Keeping It Juicy Podcast.
All right, welcome to episode 63.
Ooh, man, this is going to be a fun one.
We've got some more things to debunk with you guys today.
So, not exactly bro science, but might as well.
Just some other stuff.
Yeah, the typical stuff that you hear that your mom told you, that your mother's sister's friend's daughter told you.
Just all the nutrition garbage that is constantly circulating the world.
And I don't know how, but here we are. So before we go into that, let's go into our new nutrition in the news. And this one is a little bit different than last week. Last week we touched upon sperm, so that was a fun one. But this week, this article says it basically talks about dopamine and its biological clock link to snacking, overeating, and obesity. So there is a new study that the pleasure center of the brain and the brain's biological clock are linked, and high-calorie foods which bring pleasure disrupt normal feeding schedules, resulting in overconsumption. So in the study, they use mice as study models. The researchers mimic the 24/7 availability of a high-fat diet and show that anytime snacking eventually results in obesity and related health problems. The team found that the mice fed a diet comparable to a wild diet in calories and fats, maintained normal eating and exercise schedules, and the proper weight. But mice that were fed high-calorie diets that had a whole bunch of fat and sugars began snacking at all hours in general, and they became obese. So additionally, they had these knockout mice where the dopamine signaling was completely disrupted, so they can't, like, there's dopamine being released, but they can't receive it like we can. And so basically, since the dopamine signaling was disrupted, then because of that, they didn't seek that rewarding pleasure of the high-fat diet, and they maintained a normal eating schedule and did not become obese, even when presented with the 24/7 availability of high-calorie foods. So basically, with this, they can see that the dopamine signaling in the brain governs the circadian biology and leads to consumption of energy-dense foods between meals and during odd hours. So basically, they were saying that this lights on all the time, eating at any time lifestyle basically completely changes how we eat and how it affects our bodies and how our body uses that energy from the food that we eat. And it can even alter our metabolism via the study that they just looked at, and how it can lead to obesity, which can cause further disease. So I just thought that was something interesting, especially with the when they knocked out the dopamine in the mice, and all of a sudden they didn't want to eat any of those high fat, high sugar diets. So doesn't mean we can knock out our own dopamine signaling, but
that creates major
other
problems. Yeah.
Yeah.
Didn't you do research on melatonin and what was it? Was it insulin?
It was the metabolic syndrome.
Okay,
So
okay.
I did like a meta-analysis presentation in my master's class, and basically it did talk about the circadian rhythm and how melatonin play a role as well in the metabolic syndrome. So I mean, if you're not sleeping regularly and you're not getting enough sleep, getting that melatonin receptors, then it has that correlation that it can lead to other things, but that is still being researched.
Right. Super interesting. I mean, there are a lot of different moving parts to overeating and the circadian rhythm and whatnot. And I think you're reading the book right now, but The Willpower Instinct, it
Yeah,
talks about when you don't sleep enough, you have less willpower.
right.
That's more of a psychological thing versus a physiological thing, but they definitely are intertwined
Mhm.
to an extent. So there's that factor too. But it's interesting how this one brings into play dopamine as well.
Mhm.
So just something to think about. So let's tackle our first myth of the day.
Oh God.
And this one, I'm sure everyone has heard at some point in time, but fruit is bad for you. Um, yeah. Some even go as far to say that fruit causes diabetes. Put down your Skittles and listen. It's time to talk about this. So, fruit consumption is something that most people already don't consume enough of. And fruit is definitely taking an additional hit from popular diets that restrict it due to its natural sugar content. We're talking about the ketogenic diet, the paleo diet, the vegan diet, which is paleo and vegan, and pretty much any version of a low carb diet will pretty much ban fruit because of its high sugar content. So, current research is basically looking at the health benefits that are associated with antioxidants, flavonoids, and polyphenols that are found in fruits and vegetables. So, these components, antioxidants, flavonoids, polyphenols, may increase the overall diet quality. And by eating more of these foods, you're substituting it with less unhealthy foods, therefore improving your total macronutrient, micronutrient, and fiber content of your overall diet. So, for example, an analysis that pulled data from 4 intervention studies involving participants with various health conditions, as well as healthy older adults, found that when fruit and vegetable intake increases, so does fiber, vitamin C, beta carotene, and then total fat, saturated fat, and starch intakes decreased. I don't think you need to do like a crazy research study to like put that together, but
Right.
when you
Right.
eat more
But
fruits and
people still need to know, apparently.
no, yes, we it's great that these studies exist, but when you eat more fruits and vegetables, you're going to get more nutrients, you're going to get more phytochemicals, and you're going to decrease your total fat more than likely. I mean, unless you're,
Right.
I don't know, eating caramel apples or something like that. Like
I mean, some of them might take it that way.
I know. I take it back. Don't
It's
come
still
for me.
healthy.
I
Oh,
know. But you
man.
get the idea.
Right. Now, quickly on the topic of foods causing diabetes. First off, they don't. So what we mean by that is if you look at research, you can see that it clearly suggests otherwise. So if anything, it's probably a growing dependence on processed sugar that has fueled the obesity and type 2 diabetes epidemic that we see today. So they're talking about increased energy intake, decreased resting energy expenditure, a lot of extra fat storage, non-alcoholic fatty liver disease, insulin resistance, hyperglycemia, cardiovascular disease, and metabolic syndrome in humans. So it's not just the foods. So if you think about it, if the sugar in food is more concentrated, like you take processed simple sugars like cakes, cookies, Skittles, all that stuff, that's only going to make it easier to contribute to that unexpected calorie intake, those glycemic surges, and those abnormal metabolic responses. Meanwhile, fruit, on the other hand, yes, it does have sugar, but it's also very high volume and it has a lot of nutrition in it. And it's a lot harder to pack on the calories with just fruit unless you just happen to eat an excessive amount every single day, which I don't find that a lot at all. And even then, even if you eat a lot of fruit, it's how much weight you gain. It's still, and how much, not only how much weight you gain, but how much like fat and everything and diabetes coming on, it's still going to depend on your total energy input versus output. So your carb intake could be 80% of your diet, but as long as your calories still within range, I mean, you're not going to gain a lot of weight. So additionally, foods that are high in high fructose corn syrup are heavily processed and typically contain no fiber whatsoever, in case you didn't already know. So it is super easy to overconsume these foods. and therefore they contribute to overall more sugars and calories consumed. Like if you think about it, you're studying, you're watching TV, you're at work, and they have sugar or anything. Skittles and chocolate and Hershey's, they're really easily down. They're very easy. And when someone
Yeah,
brings
you
cakes,
can do some
cookies,
damage.
yeah, and like not really realize it versus food, it's a lot more difficult.
Right.
So it's not the food, it's us, the
Yeah,
people. It's our problem.
that's usually the issue. Yeah, in my experience, like even with people who consume a lot of fruit, it's not their main dietary issue. It's the
Right.
fruit and the pizza and the cheeseburgers and the wine and the nachos and the Dorito. Like it's not the fruit. It's the whole dietary pattern
Right.
which needs some work.
It
But
just it just cracks me up like when someone has a diet similar to that, they're like, okay, I'll just cut the food. I was like, what about the other shit?
exactly. Exactly. Like maybe we should start somewhere else.
Yes.
So, no, fruit is not bad for you, and fruit does not cause diabetes. Also, diabetics can have fruit as well. So,
Mhm.
throwing that out there.
Diabetics do need carbs.
Yes,
Just FYI.
yes. Diabetes does not mean no carbs.
Nope.
But that's a different myth for a different day. We're going to move on to myth number 2, which is that lemon burns fat.
I've
Not
heard
sure.
this. I heard that growing up when I was younger.
I think, when I was probably just allowed to start going on the internet and like started researching and
Oh
started like,
God, who knows what was on there?
but this is probably one of the first things that I remember even seeing or hearing about, like how to lose weight, which is another problem. Why should a teenager be researching how to lose weight on the internet? But, you know, that's why we're here. So let's dive into this myth. Sorry to hurt your dreams, but this is not true. There are many myths surrounding lemon juice that just don't have any scientific evidence to back up these claims. Other common claims are that lemon juice helps improve digestion and can help regulate your sugar absorption, but both really don't have enough scientific evidence to make strong claims. What I find really interesting too is that, lemon juice is acidic, but then there's also this big trend of like you need to not have an acidic diet. So it's like
Oh my,
they're so contradicting.
you're either team acid or team alkaline.
Exactly. Like team lemon juice or team what is
Milk.
it? What's that water? pH water?
I don't
You,
know.
you can't be both. You have to choose a side. So, one of our favorite myths surrounding lemon juice is that it just magically helps melt the fat away. Unfortunately, that is not true, and it's just,
Damn.
yeah, not true whatsoever. So, acidic ingredients like lemon juice are commonly used in different marinades to help like tenderize meat and poultry by actually breaking down the collagen. That's kind of like the fibrous compound that aids in the formation of connective tissue. Yes, chicken has collagen too. Um, so acidic compounds help break down that collagen. A second myth associated with this is that when lemon juice is mixed with cold or lukewarm water, it will dissolve fat in your body. Yikes. Again, this just does not happen metabolically. Although drinking more water, whether it's cold or lukewarm, will actually help keep you more hydrated. So,
Who knew?
exactly. So, in reality, improved hydration due to this placebo effect of drinking more lemon water might help with satiety, which could help with decreased calories, therefore, potentially resulting in fat loss. Might be more of the trend going on versus the lemon actually doing anything to your fat cells.
Mhm.
But lemon juice does have a few different health benefits. It is a great source of the antioxidant vitamin C, which does help fight infections. It assists with iron absorption and actually does help make collagen. So the bottom line is if you love lemon juice, go for it. Although it won't necessarily melt the pounds away, it is a tasty and healthful way to flavor food and your water. Personal experience, I do like drinking lemon water when I have a sore throat, like right now, but I definitely don't drink it for its fat burning effect. Although
Yikes.
that would be nice, but it doesn't work that way.
I don't I I'm not gonna say anymore. But with that being said, let's move on to myth number 3, which I'm sure you guys have heard this before. I've heard this multiple times. Carbs are bad for you, but you can eat as much fat as you want. Like I said, this is like team fat or team carb. Like that's how, like, I get the vibe. I mean, first of all, eating too much of anything or drinking too much of anything is a terrible idea in the first place. Even water, too much water can kill you. So I'm sorry. That's a little dramatic.
But too much of anything is a bad thing. Like
Yeah, it is.
even
But
water.
did you hear about the news about that lady dying after drinking so much water on a roller coaster because she was trying to win something for her kids?
Yeah, I did hear about that.
Yeah. So
We
it's
did
too
a whole
much water.
episode on water. Check it out.
Yeah. So what do we mean by carbs? So we're not just talking about like breads and cookies or whatever. We're talking about grains, fruits, processed sugars, legumes, beans, starchy vegetables. Those are all carbs. So just FYI. And first of all, several studies have found, for instance, we take whole grains, they found that whole grain intake is actually associated with a reduced risk of weight gain in general. Similarly, the same things have been observed between fruit intake and weight, provided that calorie needs aren't exceeded. But that's not what sells diet books. We all know that. That's not going to happen. So if we talk about comparing carbs versus fat, we'll have to break it down a bit. While many studies have found low carb diets to be more effective for weight loss than low fat diets in the I'm going to emphasize, in longer term follow up by both of these approaches, it resulted in modest weight loss at best for carbs and fats. So you can't discriminate on that.
Right. And we also know that um, low carb diets being more effective in the short term is really due to that decreased, the water weight you lose like literally the first week. So that's a
Mm-hmm.
huge contributor of why in the short term low carb diets result in more weight loss.
Mm-hmm.
Weight, water weighs too. Not necessarily like improved body composition whatsoever, but
Right.
simply weight. So just a side note there. So Kelly McManus, who's the director of nutrition at the Women's Hospital in Boston and one of the investigators for the Preventing Overweight Using Novel Dietary Strategies, which is Pounds Lost study. They found that calories matter more than macronutrient ratios. The Pounds Lost study examined the effects of 4 heart-healthy diets varying in fat, protein, and carbohydrate consumption on weight loss and long-term maintenance. The Pounds Lost trial showed that reduced calorie diets result in clinically meaningful weight loss, regardless of which macronutrient they emphasize. You might even pack on the pounds a little bit quicker because fats are more calorie dense than proteins and carbs. So, for reference, proteins and carbs each have 4 calories per gram, whereas fats have 9 calories per gram. So, that's more than double. Also, fun fact, an avocado has 12 grams of carbs. So take that, ketoers. You're still getting carbs.
Shut up. Anyways, well, we'll never stop making fun of Kiowas. And if you're offended, this ain't the podcast for
Stop
you.
it. Stop it.
Stop it. Just stop. Anyways, with that being said, let's move on to nutrition myth number 4. My favorite nutrition myth. This is bread actually soaks up alcohol. First off, this is not an Italian restaurant, so please get that shit out of here. We're not dipping our bread anywhere. So, with that being said, this old wives' tale, to make sense, eat some breads with your drinks, and it's supposed to help soak up the booze. And there could actually be just a couple crumbs of truth to it. Get what I said? Okay. Anyways, but in all honesty, it's not just the bread itself. So let me break it down. So unlike food, alcohol is not necessarily digested. It's absorbed directly into the bloodstream so that it can be eliminated from the body as fast as possible, because your body is going to sense there's alcohol. It's going to think alcohol is a toxin, so it wants to get that shit out right away. So alcohol is going to begin its journey through the digestive system in the mouth, then it travels down the esophagus to the stomach, where some of the alcohol is absorbed into the bloodstream. The stomach starts the breakdown of alcohol with an enzyme called alcohol dehydrogenase. The rest of the alcohol travels to the small intestine, where the remainder gets absorbed. On an empty stomach, it takes approximately 30 minutes for the alcohol in one standard drink to enter the bloodstream, and 60 minutes on a full stomach. So you double up on the time here. And the liver is responsible for breaking down the alcohol and removing it from your bloodstream. Food can actually assist in slowing down the absorption of alcohol. So if you fill your stomach with food, you are more than likely going to slow that absorption rate of alcohol you're drinking. However, if you think that eating more bread is going to help you a little bit, it's probably not going to be enough to sober you up, and probably from keeping you from getting drunk. So to stay sober, cut back on the bread and on the booze. So
Yeah, so it doesn't necessarily absorb it, it just slows its digestion,
it's not
which may or
fiber
may
either.
not be what you want.
Yeah,
Like,
I just want a steady buzz, man. Get that bread away from me.
see, in that scenario, you want to stay away from the bread, but so we will move on.
I was just gonna say it's 5 o'clock somewhere.
Yes, it is. So we will move on to our fifth and final myth of the day, which is that celiac disease is caused by modified wheat solely. Um, Wheat and gluten have gotten a lot of like bad reputation lately, so we're going to dive into that a little more. Um, the myth that celiac disease is caused by this modified wheat, absolutely not. So, first off, celiac disease is an autoimmune disorder characterized by a permanent intolerance to the protein gluten, which is found in wheat, rye, barley, and other grains. So, when people who have celiac disease consume gluten, their immune system responds by damaging the finger like villi in their small intestine, which over time will prevent them from absorbing vital nutrients such as iron, folate, calcium, and vitamin D. So, gluten is a combination of several proteins that are complex and not easily digested by humans. Wheat, modified or not, contains gluten among other sources. So now that we've kind of covered those basics, let's jump in a little bit deeper. For people to develop celiac disease, they have to have two strikes against them. First, they have to inherit genes that kind of put them at risk for celiac. It is an autoimmune disease, which aren't completely understood, but genetics is like the biggest component of all autoimmune diseases. Second, those with celiac disease have to eat the protein gluten that triggers the disease celiac. However, genetic predisposition and gluten consumption aren't sufficient in and of themselves to cause celiac disease, as evidenced by the fact that many people with the genetic risk factor don't develop the disease even after eating gluten. About
Mm-hmm.
1% of the population does, so something to consider. So, while genetic factors are important components of the disease, environmental factors are also the key. The main environmental trigger of celiac disease is exposure to gluten, and celiac disease typically manifests in young children after their first gluten exposures. However, a significant number of individuals don't develop celiac disease until much later in life after decades of consuming gluten. Furthermore, there are significant differences in the prevalence of celiac disease between populations that are geographically close, have similar genetic backgrounds, and have similar levels of wheat consumption. These facts are strong evidence that additional environmental factors besides genes and gluten consumption are in play here.
Right. And with that being said, there's another component to consider as well. So there are repeated studies by multiple research groups that have demonstrated that actually the bacterial composition in the gut of individuals with celiac disease differs from that of individuals without the disease. Specifically, both children and adults with celiac disease have increased proportions of more harmful bacteria and decreased proportions of the beneficial bacteria. So, if you want to learn more about the gut, please refer to our previous episodes. In addition, the microbiomes of individuals with different manifestations of celiac disease also show different pattern of a microbial composition in general. So, for instance, celiac patients with classical gastrointestinal symptoms have a lower diversity of microbes and a greater prominence of a bacteria called proteobacteria in the upper part of the small intestine than celiac patients with other non-gastrointestinal symptoms. So furthermore, celiac disease patients with persistent symptoms have higher levels of proteobacteria than those who are asymptomatic. You can still have celiac disease and be asymptomatic, just FYI. And studies such as these suggest that intestinal microbiota likely play a role in how the disease manifests. So no, it's not just modified wheat, it's a collective, it's everything that we just talked about. The end, that's it.
Exactly. Yeah.
So these are only 5 of the nutrition myths. There's way more out there. I'm sure we'll do another one of these, but please let us know your thoughts about this, your concerns. Which one stood out to you? Which one do you think you're still doing? So,
oh my gosh.
Okay. With that being said, let's please close out the episode for the week before it gets a little out of control. So let's do a social media shout out of the week, and it goes to Christine.home1, and she is an artie, and she's a photographer, she's an equestrian, she's a foodie, and she has a lot of cool pictures on there and all that good stuff.
We dig it.
Yeah, we appreciate you supporting us. We do recognize that, and if you want to be our next social media shout out, continue to comment, like all that good stuff. So yeah, thank you.
Yes, thank you. And yeah, we will catch you guys in the next one.
Bye, guys.
Bye.
Thanks for listening to the Keeping It Juicy podcast.
You mean squeeze and nutrition.
Don't forget to subscribe so you can join us every Tuesday for a brand new episode.
Also, you can find us on Instagram and Facebook at Keeping It Juicy Podcast.
We'd love to hear from you, so please leave us a review.
5 stars, no less.
On whatever platform you're listening to, or send us an email at keepingitjuicypodcast@gmail.com.
Or if you have any topics you'd like for us to touch upon, shoot us an email. Until next time, don't do anything that I wouldn't do.
Anyways, so our favorite myth surrounding lemon juice is that it can magically help
Way to combine the words. Your brain was just like...
by damaging the finger-like villi in the small intestine. If you're not watching the video, gotta raise up your villi. If you're a nutrition student, you have to do that each time.
That's like a great way to hit on somebody.
Always.
Just wave with your villi, people.
Shut up.
Hashtag vilify.
Hashtag what?
Vilify or hashtag
Show me your villi.
Oh, hashtag show me your villi.
Don't make that face ever again.
What the hell? The people deserves to see that. I can't even talk. People deserve to see that.